Okay, welcome everyone to Denby Down Amateur Radio Club. Delighted to see our members here tonight, and as delighted to see visitors to the club this evening. You're extremely welcome. Our speaker tonight is Daimon G4USI, and it was his article that was published in the October edition of Practical Wireless, reviewing some of the Xiegu Chinese HF transceivers that perked my interest, in part because I own one of them. I own the X5105 transceiver, and I've got split views about it, and so I'm interested to get Damon's spin on the radio. I thought he would make a very, very good presentation because they are of interest to many amateurs, because the price is so much cheaper than the ones that we get from the other manufacturers, and they're all relatively low power transceivers, and with lots of features in them that make them very interesting. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Daimon. Hopefully, I just need a word of warning for viewers tonight, and those of you who watch it later on catch up on our YouTube channel. If it suddenly goes off in the middle, or Daimon goes off, he did explain to me they've had one or two broadband problems at his QTH. We have set up an alternative. If all fails on the computer front for Daimon, I can run the PowerPoint from here, and Daimon can dial in on his mobile phone. But hopefully we're not going to need that. It's all going to work brilliantly, Daimon. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to you and let you introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks very much, Nick, and good evening, everybody. A lot of people to talk to tonight. I can see half the faces on the screen at once, but I've had a little zoom through, and it's good to see so many faces. So hopefully you'll enjoy what I've got to say this evening. So first of all, about the broadband. I live down in Somerset on the eastern edge of Exmoor National Park, so it's rural in the extreme as far as southern England is concerned. And my download speed of internet this morning was down to 0.5 megabyte per second. That's how bad it got. So I've thrown the kids off. I've rebooted the router. British Telecom are useless and haven't fixed anything yet, but I'm hoping we'll just get through. Worst comes to the worst, as I say, Nick and I have got a backup plan, so bear with me if we have to implement that. So first thing I'm going to do is try and share my screen. So I'll be looking for some feedback in a second to make sure that you've got that. Can people see that?
We can, yeah, yep. Brilliant.
Yep. Okay, I'm just going to start the slideshow. And so hopefully you can see the first slide, can you?
We can, yeah.
Okay. So, thank you for the invitation, Nick. If you're a regular reader of Practical Wireless, you may have seen a number of articles from me over recent years. But tonight, particularly, I'm going to talk to you about Xiegu HF transceivers. And as Nick said, that was a feature of a review I did in the October Practical Wireless. I'm about halfway through writing a series of 12 articles for PW, which are running over 24 months. Entitled Amateur Radio on a Budget. I'm not quite sure why that sort of started, really, except to say that I consider myself fortunate. If I wanted to go out and buy a new rig, I could afford to do that. But I get a lot of pressure from using older equipment, which I tend to buy used or secondhand, or equipment that I've built myself. But it became very apparent to me, watching Facebook and other social media groups, that particularly new entrants to the hobby might be put off by cost, but also that people seem to think that it was really important to go out and buy something with all the bells and whistles and spend as much as they can in order to be successful. And I just don't agree with that viewpoint necessarily, although of course you can do that. So as part of writing that on a budget series, and being the owner of a particular Xiegu model myself, I thought it'd be quite nice to do a review of the three, particularly because of their price point versus performance. And so that's what I'm talking to you about tonight. If you read the Practical Wireless article in October, there will be a little bit of information repeated here, of course, necessarily, but also I'll share some new information that didn't appear in that article, which hopefully those of you who have read it will find some added interest from. The first slide here shows the Xiegu G1M. That's one of the rigs of the three that are reviewed and we'll talk about tonight. The picture on the right is actually a picture of me in China, coincidentally. That's taken in 2016 in Beijing. I was lucky enough, having retired from my previous career, to be invited out by the United Nations to China to deliver some leadership training to senior police officers in China and senior military officers in China who were preparing to do some UN peacekeeping missions. So I just throw that picture there really because it was a bit of a China interest. I wasn't actually back into radio at that point, and so I didn't get the opportunity to sort of take my radio with me, which is a great missed opportunity really. But what we're going to do tonight is have a canter through a little bit about the history of me and amateur radio, just very briefly. I was born in '67, so I'm a bit of a whippersnapper. I'm only 54, and I became a shortwave listener in 1980. And in that picture on the left, which is my shack from about 1983, you'll see a brown wooden radio in the bottom left underneath two homebrew kits and an orange flashing beacon. That's a Pi Cambridge broadcast receiver that was gifted to me by a great aunt and got me into shortwave listening. But then I got my G6PRY call in '82. A year later, did the CW test, became G4USI, started my career, started a family, and I was essentially absent from the hobby for 26 years between 90 and 2016. I'd retired from my 30-year career in 2015 and picked up radio as part of what am I going to do now? And I noticed that there's a massive amount to relearn. So much had changed, you know, FT8 and all the digital modes that didn't exist back then, and a whole gamut of stuff, SDR. So I had a massive relearning curve. And as I started that relearning, I thought, well, actually, perhaps other people like me or people new to the hobby could benefit from what I was learning as I was learning it. So I started writing for Practical Wireless. I've also written a little bit for Radcom and Radio User. And I'm really into pretty much most things amateur radio. I tend to wimp out above 70 centimeters, but I'm into HF, particularly CW and QRP, homebrew and some commercial stuff, both QRP and QRO. And I'm also made a start last winter having a crack with FM and SSP satellites on 2 and 70. Which again is a pretty steep learning curve, but I made some headway. Progress stopped for the summer, but I'm hoping to get back onto that this winter. So that's where I came from, and that's how I started writing really, because I was sharing as I was learning. But tonight we're going to look at the Chinese HF transceivers, particularly the Chinese ones from the Xiegu stable. Linking back to that article in October. That article is available for download, by the way, as of all my previous articles on my website, which was on the first slide. I'll perhaps stick it up again later if there's an opportunity. And so if we take a look at what Xiegu or who Xiegu are, their proper name I think is Chongqing Xiegu. I think it's pronounced Xiegu. So CQ Xiegu for short. Most of us just know them as Xiegu. They were established back in 2010 in Shenzhen. Shenzhen in China is one of the big technology cities. And back then they launched a couple of products which are now old and obsolete, the X1M and the X108G, which you'll see on the right there. And I remember seeing them on eBay when I first got back into the hobby in 2016, thinking never heard of them. And being a traditionalist, you know, it's a Yaesu or it's a Kenwood or it's an Icon for me type thing, you know. So I didn't pay them a great deal of attention. But they've got 3 current transceivers on the market. Those 2 don't exist anymore. They also have a 100-watt power amplifier with a built-in ATU, which interestingly is being marketed by some of our British resellers as being a good companion to the IC705. They also have something called the GSOC touchscreen controller, and they've got a new transceiver coming out very, very soon, which I'll touch on as well. So let's have a look at their stable. What happened was back in about August, having owned the X5105, which Nick has got for a little while, which I'll talk about in a minute, I dropped an email to Alan at Sinotel. Sinotel is the UK main importer for Xiegu rigs. And I just asked if he could lend me the 2 rigs that I didn't own, basically. And he very kindly sent them both to me. And I had them both on test for about a month. And I had all 3 of the Xiegu rigs lined up on the shack desk, and was switching between antennas and things, and took them all out portable, and had a real good old play. This one is a little beaut, the G1M core. It's about the size of my hand, including the fingers. It weighs probably less. I mean, it is absolutely featherweight. It covers 80, 40, 20 and 15, does sideband and CW, general coverage receive across HF, 5 watts out. It's SDR based. There's a pan adapter. You can see on the picture there that on the display, the pan adapter, I've got the gain turned up, I think too much for that photograph, but the pan adapter, if you turn the gain properly, is much more effective than that. 2 VFOs, CW Kia, but no CW memory, sadly. And it's got cap control. The display is very clear. It's an OLED, black and white, very easy to see in bright sunshine. It's really, really featherweight light, and it's only £239. I mean, that's remarkable. £239 for a rig with 4 bands, all mode, general coverage receive. I mean, crikey, you know, how do they do it? In fact, actually, if you, there's a little caveat later about buying from eBay and other places rather than buying from Alan at Sinatel. In fact, it's a big caveat. But actually, this is one of the exceptions. If you go online, you can actually find this considerably cheaper from AliExpress and other places, down to 179 quid. So 60, 70 quid cheaper. Worry about your warranty, perhaps, if you're borrowing it from China, but nonetheless, you can get it very cheaply. And it's a stunning little performer. I was pretty much blown away by it. In fact, if it hadn't been for what I consider to be a slightly odd choice of bands there, I'd have bought one as a little portable QRP CW rig. It'd be great in your backpack because it's so light. The trouble is, I think 80, 40, 20, 15 is a bit of an odd choice of band for portable. I think it's good probably for in the shack, but actually if you're out portable, are you going to be taking, you know, an antenna that's resonant on 80 meters? I mean, you might use something with a loading cord or something perhaps, but you know, 80, most of us who go out QRP portable don't tend to operate on 80. So it would have been nice to have seen that with perhaps either a different selection of bands or the ability to specify the model you want with a different selection of bands. But it works really well. The speaker quality is quite good, actually. Its broadcast receive was quite impressive. And my main rig here in the shack is a homebrew SDR transceiver, not of my design, I have to say. But it's made by a friend of mine in Taunton, not far away. And it runs on some software called Power SDR, and it's a really red hot receiver. Actually, there was nothing that I couldn't hear on my main SDR. I couldn't hear on any of these Xiegu rigs, actually, as it happens, including this one. So it's a really nice little rig, very easy to use. You don't need to refer to the manual. The touch buttons along the bottom there in yellow will pop up on the display when you press one and tell you what it does. It's not hugely menu intensive, very easy to use. So, you know, if you're really on a budget, £180 from China or 240 from the UK with a guaranteed warranty, you're on the air, and you're on your air quite effectively. This is the X5105. I noticed something's just dropped off the bottom of my text here, but I'll cover that, so I'm sorry. This is, I didn't realise Nick owned this. I knew he'd got a Xiegu. I didn't realise he got the 5105. I bought this secondhand 2 years ago for £300. They're retail currently at 500. And I think they're pretty much about to be obsolete, and I'll explain why later with the new rig coming. I bought this and was really quite pleased with it until I realised that CW didn't work. And actually, what I realised is, and we'll touch on this a bit later on, is that the firmware version that this had got when I got it didn't effectively do CW. It clipped the first few characters and it made it unusable. But version 3 firmware came out a little while later, and when I uploaded that, this now works for me at least superbly. Top band to 6 meters, 1 to 55 megs on receive, variable power from 0.1 to 5 watts. All mode. It says FM. A big caveat there: it doesn't work on FM. It says it's got FM. It might receive FM, but it doesn't transmit effectively on FM. A friend of mine on the road, mile in the nearest village, he bought one when he saw mine. We tried to have a little natter on 50 megs FM. the modulation is just not intelligible. So a big pinch of salt. I don't know why it's marketed like that, but it doesn't work. It's a double super het, not SDR. It has got an IF output though, and I have successfully plugged it into a Raspberry Pi and run, I think it was HD SDR or one of the SDR softwares with it as a pan adapter, and with cat control, so I could actually use the big SDR screen to control the radio. Wasn't easy to set up, but I managed to do it. It's got an inbuilt CW keyer, and helpfully it's got CW memory. So if you're out doing a SOTA activation, you can just press CQ SOTA or your SOTA reference button you've pre-programmed. As I say, quack control, twin VFOs, most of what you'd expect, I suppose. It also does RTTY and PSK31 built in. It's a little bit formulaic. It will receive RTTY and PSK31 and decode it. But to send anything with it, you can only send pre-formatted messages that you've already programmed. I've only used it once or twice. So those modes really aren't my thing anyway. Crucially, though, for me, this is what makes this a really nice radio for me. It's got an internal battery, an internal ATU, and I'll talk more about the Xiegu ATUs later, because believe me, they are a force to be reckoned with. A 3.5-inch big monochrome display, which is absolutely beautifully crystal clear, nicely backlit. All the buttons are backlit, as you can see there in that photograph. And it has got, with the ATU, it's also got an internal SWR analyzer, and you'll see that in a few slides. And it's really compact and robust. Think house brick. It's about the size of a house brick. It's about, so I'll put it on the desk in front of me. I suppose I could hold it up, but it's and it's built like a brick. I mean, it's nearly a kilo in weight, but I think it would survive quite a lot of rough and tumble. It's well made, well put together. It's just under a kilo in weight, and it costs £500. I say I bought mine used for 300. Now the latest version of the software, version 3, is in there. I've had no problems with it at all, and you'll see some pictures later where I was experimenting with just how good the ATU is in a short while. It was my main QRP rig. If I just wanted to go out, throw it in a bag somewhere for an hour or two, that's what I would take. I've taken it in the caravan. I took it all around Europe with me. I did 26 countries in 17 days on the train with the family. Oh, no, 17. Yes, that's right. No, 26 countries in 17 days on an interrail with the family a couple of years ago, just before COVID. Took that with me, operated from all of those countries, and it was just a delight to use. Little 13.8 volt charger in the wall will charge the internal battery, and away you go. I've even got a picture on my website of me on the train in Germany with a little mini magnetic loop trying to operate CW from the train while it was moving, but it's far too much noise from the electric train to make that work. But a nice rig, and I'd be interested to hear Nick's observations on it later about why he's in a bit of a love-hate with his. This is the G90. This is the other rig I didn't own that they sent to me. Top band to 10, again, general coverage received. Anything from 1 to 20 watts out. It only draws 4 amps at 20 watts. SSB, CW, and AM, for those of you who are like AM. It's an SDR. It's got a lovely pan adapter and waterfall, as you can see on the picture there. It works really well. CW keyer, sadly no memories. I think that's a bit of an oversight. Cat control, twin VFOs, the usual thing. The display is really quite small. It's only 1.8 inch, and you can see the scale in relation to my thumb there. You think, crikey, how am I ever going to see that? But I tell you, it is crystal clear. Not so good in full direct sun, but anything other than full direct sun, it's fine. And it's a really nice display. It's got really nice filtering, and you can see, I can't point at the picture, can I? But can you see my mouse? No.
Yes.
Can you see my mouse on the screen there on the radio? Okay. So here you can set the bandwidth.
We can see it. We can see your mouse. Yeah.
Okay. You can set bandwidth filtering there, and IF shift really easily, and that's very effective. And then there's some function buttons along here, which I won't bore you with, but again, band and mode switch on the top. But really easy to use. I was pretty much blown away by this radio, I have to say, in the month that I had it. The head comes away, it's detachable and pulls off at the front. So if you wanted to mount it in some sort of a go box or put it in a car mount or something, you can do that. There's no internal battery and it's a little heavy. It's at 1.7 kilos, but it's much lighter and more compact than my old Xiegu FT891 was. Obviously not 100 watts. So That is £389. Absolute bargain at £389. Again, not without one or two faults. The model that Alan sent me from Sinotel had a bit of a failure after a week or so. The SWR was up and down all over the place, along with the power output, for no understandable reason. Checked, double checked, triple checked all my 3 antennas here. All the SWRs were well down. In the end, I sent it back to him as if it was a warranty job, and he sent me a new one. I've never had a problem since. So I don't know what the issue was there. But the one I've had since has been perfectly fine. And again, comparing that with the other two was an interesting thing. I had all 3 lined up on the desk, and I had an hour-long QSO with a guy called Tony in Italy, IK6BZW. I was spoken to a few times, and we share some similar interests. And we were swapping between these 3 rigs, as well as antennas at my end. And he was very complimentary about the audio. What was interesting to me, though, was from my end, listening, the X5105, which is a tiny little tinny speaker, was making my ears hurt after a while. I had to switch back to the G90, which has got lovely received audio, because the speaker's so tiny in the 5105. But I found a way around that. You know, you just plug in one of those little Pebble Bluetooth speakers, and it transforms it, and it becomes a pleasure to listen to. What I found with the 20 watts of the Xiegu as well is that the difference between the 5 watts and the 20 watts, you know, nominally, it's just doubling the power and doubling the power again. So one S point. But actually, in marginal conditions, it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference to have I don't do that much SSB portable, mainly CW, but when I am using SSB, the difference between the 5 and the 20 watts makes all the difference in marginal conditions between having a QSO and not. So a nice little rig. I liked it so much, I bought it. And I'll explain why in a minute. The question is, are they any good? Well, you know, I like them enough that I own 2 of them now. The 5105 and the G90 both fill a bit of a niche for me. And I sort of use them like this, really. In practice, the G90 has become my rig of choice if I'm just nipping out in the car and I've got a couple of hours to spare, or if I'm in the caravan. It's very simple, just to plug it into the cigarette lighter socket of the car. My youngest son does a lot of mountain biking on Exmoor on a Saturday morning, so I can find myself on a high spot. That's near Dunkery Beacon, which is near to a SOTA site, and I can just throw the radio on the dashboard, throw a mag mount on the roof. I used to use just a 20-meter ham stick, which the ATU would tune up to 10 meters if I wanted it to, and operate away merrily. I've got a little bit more sophisticated with the antenna now. I use a 16-foot telescopic whip, an MFJ 1979 type clone on the tow bar and a few radials just to get a bit of a better signal out. But it fills that use case nicely. It also fills the use case in the caravan. That's a 10-meter fishing pole there attached to the side of the caravan with a couple of window lifters, you know, these suction window lifters, and it's just Velcro strapped on. And I can plug that into the accessory socket of the caravan or into a separate battery and operate very nicely. The Xiegu, the rig, and an antenna all fit into that bag there. Everything's in there, including a battery pack. So it becomes really quite useful portable unit, and I say just draws 4 amps at 20 watts. And again, the difference between 20 watts and 100 is only about the same as the difference between 5 and 20. So I'm not fussed about taking a lot of power with me. And then on the right hand side is the Xiegu 5105. That's in one of my fields, and I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute, loading some strange stuff. But that's the go-to radio if you just want to stick it in your bag and you want the minimum of fuss. Just take a length of wire, throw it up in a tree, connect it to your BNC socket, and that's your station. Right, let's just move on. So the ATUs in Xiegu rigs deserve a special mention. Now, first of all, I caused a bit of a ruckus with this when I posted some of this on Facebook. I know, trust me, I do know that a resonant antenna is always going to be better than a non-resonant antenna with an ATU because of losses and efficiency and so on and so forth, radiation pattern, all of that. So I get it. But actually, when you're out in the field and you want some frequency agility, you know, if you go out for a day with your radio and you're planning on working on 20 meters and you find that 20 meters is closed but 40 is open, you know, and you haven't got a 40-meter antenna, well, you're flipping glad you've got an ATU that you can load up a length of wire, to be quite honest. So I just thought I'd put to test just how good the ATU is. And the picture on the left is me loading up my metal cowshed gate. It's a 14-foot metal gate. The picture in the center is my stock trailer. And if you look between the two wheels on the mudguard, you'll see the 5105. I've got a counterpoise laying on the ground, 5 meters long. And then I've got a crocodile to the stock trailer. I loaded the stock trailer. The top right picture is a 1.2 meter telescopic whip, again with a 5 meter counterpoise, just connected directly to the BNC socket, loaded from 40 up, I think, or might have been 30 up on that. And the bottom right, I've got a big polytunnel that's 43 foot long and 16 foot wide, and lots of metal connecting it, 8 hoops there, and it's just connected to the hoops. What's interesting about that is, and that tuned from 40 up, what's interesting about it is that those hoops are directly earthed, they're buried in the ground, and it's still loaded. And on all of those pictures there, I did some CW CQs and then looked at the reverse beacon network. Every single one had several spots around Europe. I didn't have any QSOs. I didn't bother trying, to be honest, and perhaps I should. But every one had at least half a dozen reverse beacon network spots from around the UK. So I thought, oh, well, that's quite interesting. Not that you'd want to use one as an antenna particularly, but you know, if you were pressed. This is an aerial shot of my place. I've got a small holding with 4 or so acres, and the red outline there is my electric fence. There's about 0.6 of a mile of electric fence there, which runs around my 2 main fields, and the 4 appendages in the middle. That's the electric fence around my orchard to keep the cows away from the trees. And the picture you saw earlier, if I just go back, if I can, will it let me go back? Not that one. That one, the picture on the right there, that's me loading the electric fence, half a mile of electric fence. And the counterpoise is connected to the stock fence, which is just underneath it, which is again about a half a mile of stock netting, which is just touching the ground. And I loaded that up, and that loaded from top band all the way up. With the ATU, the electric fence was switched off, by the way. Otherwise, we'd have a Marconi spark gap incident, I reckon. And I didn't at the time of doing this and publishing it, I didn't. But since I've had some successful CW QSOs on every band using the electric fence this summer, and it's only about 1 meter, 1.2 meter above the ground, so it's envious. But it works quite well. Really good counterpoise, of course, with the same amount of stock fence underneath it. So it will tune beautifully. The picture on the left-hand side is the screenshot of the X5105's SWR analyzer of the electric fence there, tuning on 80, and you'll see the line goes along the top black bar, then drops suddenly, and then climbs back up at the end, and you'll see that there's an SWR measured of 1.2 to 1 on 80 meters there at that particular point. And then if we look at the next slide, this is the G90 SWR analyzer, or scanner they call it here, and you'll see the yellow line is the trace popping along at 4 to 1 and dropping down to 1.2 on 7 megs. Now, when I go QRP portable, one of my antennas of choice for QRP portable is the end-fed half wave, because you know, you cut it to whatever, you know, 80 meters or 40 meters and match it with a 49 to 1 transformer, and it's resonant on every band, every higher band. So it's a versatile antenna. And I thought, well, why do you use a 49 to 1 with an end-fed half wave? The answer is because the impedance at the end feed point is somewhere in the region of 2.5 to 4,500 ohms, depending on which literature you read. And I thought, well, could the ATU match that without the 49 to 1 transformer? So this is me on the patio. I've strung out I've got a fishing end-fed half wave 40 meters on a fishing line, and I strung it out literally just a couple of meters up into some trees and into the hedge there. And I plugged it directly into the back of the G90, 5 meter counterpoise, to the ground connection on the back of the G90, because there is one, and it tuned. And it tuned really well. I had lots of, you see my little homemade paddles there. I had lots of CW QSOs that afternoon on an end-fade halfway with no 49-1. And I've tried it on the 5105 and it works equally well. So again, from a portable point of view, one less thing to carry. No need to carry coax to fit between the 49-1 and the SO239. Just plug it in with a banana jack into the back of your SO239 and away you go. Outstanding. I mean, truly outstanding ATUs. I'm sounding like a salesman. I don't mean to. There are some caveats, which I'll come on to in a minute. So let's just have a quick look at accessories. I haven't tried these. I might ask to try them in the future. This is the XPA 125B linear, costs £450. Again, sold by Sinotel. The data's there, 100 watts to 5 watts in, top band to 6, all mode, built-in ATU, LCD display. You can turn the ATU off and on. With the Xiegu rigs and the right connector, it will auto band change, but with other rigs, I think some it might and others it doesn't. I'm not quite sure because I've never had a play. I'm not sure if the ATU in that is quite as good a matching device as the ones in the rigs. I don't know. I've heard some stories that perhaps it's not. But I say, I think Martin Lynch and others are actually touting that at the minute, along with the 705, if people want to increase the power of their QRP rigs. And it's quite a compact looking unit. And then they also do this is called the G-Sock. For the life of me, I've not worked out what G-Sock stands for. But it's designed to complement, I think it works with the X5105, but it's actually designed to work with the G90. It's a big, it's almost like a tablet, I suppose, a bit chunkier than a tablet, and it's designed to connect to the G90 and it becomes a big pan adapter screen. It's a touch screen and you can operate your rig sort of semi-remotely at the end of the wire, I suppose. It's still connected by a wire. It adds FM mode to the G90, which it doesn't have, and I believe that does actually work properly. It does decode digital modes. It's also got automatic voice keyer and things like that as well. You can use a mouse and keyboard with it, and it's got sound cards built in, which I suspect will simplify connecting for the digi modes, but I've not tried it. Multi-band equalizers to receive and transmit as well, and you can change band and frequency a little quicker than you can on the rig. Not massively, but a little. But it's the price. It's £389. It's the same price as the rig. I don't get that. The G90 is 389, that's 389. So you know what you're looking at, 760. Well, you're into 891 territory there, aren't you? Really, I don't know. I don't quite get it. But it's there. A number of people have bought it. I don't know whether or not there are issues with it or not, but from what I've not really picked up that many people are having an issue with it. So it looks like it's working okay. And then this little baby, I am really looking forward to seeing. This has been muted for some time. A lot of us thought it was probably smoke and mirrors and it was never going to see the light of the world. But they are taking pre-orders now at various places. And I've been promised a pre-production model to review for PW. So I'm desperately looking forward to get my hands on this. This is like the X5105 combined with the G90, combined with the G-Sock. It's the Xiegu radio on steroids, frankly. 4-inch color touchscreen, pan adapter, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, memory card, USB support, same built-in battery, same built-in ATU. SDR architecture this time instead of double superhet like the 5105. I think this could be a beaut. The price I'm not quite sure about yet. I think it's coming in at about £600. It's not been announced properly because I'm not selling it yet. But about 600 quid, I think. And I think that if you were thinking about an ICOM 705 at 1,200 quid, but frankly, if you look at it, it looks like it's going to so fragile it's going to break. So people spend hundreds of pounds wrapping them up in fancy carry cages. I've never tried one, by the way. There may be a lovely radio, and I'd like one, but I wouldn't justify the money to take it out in the field and potentially damage it. And I think this could be a real contender, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this and having a play. And I think this will replace the 5105. I think I'm expecting that I might get my hands on one early next month, I hope. What's interesting, by the way, if you'd read Practical Wireless Reader, my current month's edition landed on my desk today. I've got 2 articles in it this month. One of them is this one, the review of the Lab 599 Discovery TX500. That's a beautiful little rig. It's Russian, not Chinese, but it's £900. And whilst I enjoyed it and I like playing with it, that £900 doesn't have an internal ATU, doesn't have an internal battery. It is pretty waterproof. I've had it out in the rain for good old 10 minutes soaking and it still worked. But it's 900 quid. And you know, it doesn't hear any better than any of the 3 Xiegus, including the £239 one. And the transmitted audio is no better. So you pay your money, you take your choice. If you want that sort of rugged look, and it really is very beautiful, and if you want waterproof, then you know it's probably worth your 900 quid. But otherwise, you know, it's no better than any of these 3 here, in my opinion. I didn't put it through any lab tests. Others have done that, but from a user's point of view, any of these radios I've described to you tonight, if you can work it, you can more than hear it. And effectively, from a QRP rig, you know, that's all you want. You're not going to be, well, you might be into some QRP contests, but you're not looking for a big multi-thousand-pound contest rig here that can hear the socks off anything. If you can hear it, or rather, if you can work it, you will definitely hear it. And when it comes to the QRP world, for me, that's what it's about. But as I said earlier on, there are some caveats. Nothing is perfect. So you do need to be a little cautious. You know, you are getting a bargain basement price. You're getting a good radio for the price that performs remarkable, but they're not perfect. So there have been some firmware issues. Xiegu aren't the only company now that a lot of radios are software defined to do this. You know, they'll release a first release of software, and then they'll release updates later on. And sometimes that's because their initial version just didn't work. The 705 is no different. But when I bought my 5105, you remember me saying it didn't have the current and latest version of the firmware on it, which meant that CW was unusable. So if you're buying one of their rigs, you need to be aware that when it comes out with the early version of the firmware, you know, not everything might work properly or well. What I have come to learn, though, is that though they're not the fastest of operating companies, they only have one programmer, a fellow called Jet, they do get there. My own experience has been is that it might take a little while for these things to be fixed, and sometimes when they're fixed, there'll be an unintended consequence and something else won't work. So you'll wait for the next one to come out, and then hopefully, you know, at some point everything gets fixed. So you do, it's a little caveat emptor. You get a lot of radio for your money, but that is an issue in my experience. And it'll be really interesting to see with the 6100 whether they've nailed that or not, and whether or not everything works perfectly when I first get it. You can get some spurious behavior. You know, that G90 that came to me failed after a week completely unexpectedly and through no fault of mine. It happens, and I'm not sure whether or not the Xiegu rigs are any more or any less capable of doing that than any other rig, quite frankly, but it does happen with these rigs. There have been some reports on the G1M and in fact on the G90 of some of the connectors been a little bit fragile. Some of the connectors aren't fixed to the enclosure, they're just soldered to the board and then poked through the enclosure, which can lead to a bit of stress on the plugs and things. There's been an issue with some of the G90 mic sockets in that way, but again, repairable. And a big caveat is beware where you buy. And I touched on this earlier, you know, you can get the G1M, instead of £239, you can get it for £179 off the internet. I don't know what warranty you'd get with it. But equally, you know, you go on eBay, I'm gobsmacked how people have got the nerve to do this. So the G90 is £389. There are people selling it on eBay now who aren't the main dealers, who are selling it at £500. Are people paying these prices? But my advice to you would be, if you're looking to buy one for the first time, unless you're buying it secondhand, I would go to Sinatel. Sinatel is the only UK, I've got no tie or affiliation with them, but they're the only UK dealer. I know I was reviewing their radio, but when I sent that the G90, so I might be getting a bit of a false impression of their customer service. But actually, if you're on the Facebook groups for these rigs, and there's a lot of them, everybody almost without question, has a great customer experience with Sinocell if they've got an issue. Then the warranty service is very good. My friend who'd got the 5105 up the road that he'd bought second-hand, it was out of warranty. There was an issue with the antenna connector, and the Sinocell said, yeah, send it back to us and we'll fix it. And I think they charged him a tenner to fix the socket and send it, and then postage to send it back. So they are good. And so if I was then to sort of like summarize what I've shared with you tonight, I've got 2 slides of summary really. I think personally for me, they've got a really good current range of rigs. I'm very excited to see the new one. They're rarely perfect on first release though. And so be prepared if you're an early adopter to have a little bit of frustration. I don't tend to be an early adopter of any product really. I usually tend to wait till version 2 or 3 is out before I tend to buy something new. But if you are an early adopter, be aware of that. They do get there in the end with firmware. The 5105, mine at least, has been stable for well over a year now, and I love it. The G90 with the latest firmware now also appears to have reached stability. I've not seen any complaints of late with the latest firmware there, which is 1.7, I think. The 6100, I think, I'd love to be able to test the 600 alongside a 705, because I just think that might, apart from VHF and UHF, which it doesn't have, I think that could be a bit of a rival. I did have the FT818. I reviewed that in Practical Wireless the year I went on this European tour, and I had that alongside my Xiegu 5105, and I was going to take the 818 on my European tour. That was in the crux of my review, but I operated them side by side, and the Xiegu, in my view, was better. And partly that was because the FT818 didn't have any CW filters in it. You have to pay extra for those. And so, for CW on a busy night on a weekend, it was almost unusable. And it's, let's be honest, it's a 30-year-old rig. I know it's got its great aficionados. There's probably many of you here now who are getting really angry in the chair, thinking, what you're talking about, Daimon, it's a brilliant rig. But, Yaesu just aren't, they're not, I don't think, Yaesu are particularly innovating in the QRP market at the moment. Nobody really is. ICOM just have the 705. Yaesu need to, because the 818 is, in my view, is just a cash cow for them. Well, Kenwood don't have anything in the market, do they? So actually, what we have, I think, is we've got this Chinese manufacturer who have brought these range of radios to market, and they're doing all of the innovation for us. I wouldn't be surprised if it's, I don't know this for a fact, because I'm sure the 705 has been in long in the planning, but I would imagine that if you're in ICOM looking at your product line, you'd be thinking, well, look at what Xiegu are doing, and we can't be outbeaten here, and let's go and produce something. And the G90, I think, really hits a sweet spot with its 20 watts for SSB portable. Makes a difference on SSB without a doubt, over 5. They're great value for money. The G1M is phenomenal low-cost purchase for a full band rig for around £200. Warranty issues, as I said, I'd urge you to think about Sinocell if you're buying new. And we've touched on the variation in prices and how some people are asking ridiculous money. At the end of the day, I think Xiegu are innovating and bringing new products to market all the time. And I think they're doing that at a rate that's really promising for the future, because I don't see that level of innovation and that nimbleness, that ability to bring new products to market reasonably quickly, even if they're not perfect to start with, amongst any of the other 3 manufacturers. So for people like me who are really interested in QRP radios, they're a bit of a bonus, really. All their rigs are QRP focused at the moment, and I wonder if that will stay. I'm surprised they haven't produced an HF 100-watt rig yet, for the shack. I'm not quite sure why they wouldn't have done that. They've clearly got the technology. They've got a 100-watt amp, and they've got lots of 5 and 20-watt rigs. So we'll wait and see. Their manuals are pretty poor, mind you. Be aware if you buy one. They're written in Chinglish. They're often not updated, so they'll be written in relation to the first set of firmware, and later firmware will completely change menus and things like that. But the community, the Xiegu community of users, tend to produce lots of cheat sheets and better manuals and put them online, so all's not lost. And there's a massive community of people on Facebook. There's at least 3 or 4 different Facebook user groups for the different models, and a groups IO for support. The bottom line for me is they offer really high quality performance at a budget price. And I think we need more people like Xiegu to keep the big 3 on their toes, quite honestly, and stop them from being lazy. So that's it. That's a whistle-stop tour of my experience of the 3 rigs. So with no further ado, if anybody's got any questions, I'll be happy to open it up, Nick.
Okay, brilliant, Damon. That was really interesting and thoroughly enjoyed it. And certainly at some point in the discussion tonight, I'll give you my spin on the 5105 as well. But let's open it up to general discussion. Who would like to go first with a question or comment to Damon? If I don't see you straight away, then waving. Yeah, Ray, G0JAR. You need to unmute. You're on mute, Ray.
Got it.
You're still on mute.
Unmute.
So I can hear you
Right.
now.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for a very, very interesting talk there, Damon. And the question that I was going to ask, you've answered anyway about the manual. I was going to say, is it, translated Chinese? Because I find most of those totally confusing. But it's good to know that there are people out there who will produce something that you can read and understand. And I'm particularly interested in the G90. It would suit my needs very, very well with a mag mount stuck on top of the car, because antennas here where I live are a no-go. So going up on a hill somewhere with a mag mount and one of those will be absolutely ideal for me. And so I'd like to say thank you very much for the talk. That's been very, very interesting.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Who else has got a question or comment to Damon? Yeah, Richard, RBG.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Damien. I noticed you didn't compare to any of the Helicraft, the KX3 and like.
Yeah, well, I've never owned or operated the Helicraft. When I first got back into QRP, and before I started building some QRP radios, I did think about buying the KX2 or the KX3. And when I was toying with that or a Xiegu, I went onto a number of the Facebook sites and I had conversations on Facebook with 2 or 3 people who actually own both the KX2 or 3 and the X5105. And without any prompting from me, most of them, I think all of them actually said that they like them both almost equally. And I think the ATU of the Xiegu has been compared to the Helicraft ATU, which you can almost tune a piece of wet string to. But I've never actually tried them myself. But certainly 2 or 3 people have said to me, you've got both, not much to choose between them, and save you money was the advice I got.
Yeah, and it saves a lot of money, doesn't it?
Yeah, half the price, really.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Adrienne.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I myself own a Xiegu G90, and I think it's a very great rig, and I worked all over Europe with it, with an end-fed half wave, and I use it also portable for SSB operation, and it was quite great. I have a question about the connection to the power supply. It's a little bit tiny, and I'm fearing if there will be, in case something with it, to get a replacement. Do you have an idea where I can get something like this?
Yes. Do you mean the actual cable with the plug, or do you mean the plug actually fixed to the back of the radio, Adrian?
The cable with the plug.
Ah, okay. Well, you can certainly get those from Sinotel. I've got a couple of spare ones, but there is a European. Who is the European company that sells them? Is it DX something? I thought they were German. Forgive me if they're not. I'll have a look in a minute when towards the end, and if I can find something, I'll let Nick have it. But there is a European mainland Europe supplier who I think supplies them. They're actually a mini Tamiya connector. Tango Alpha Mike, India Yankee Alpha. Tamiya make remote control cars. So if you put into eBay or something like that, mini Tamiya connector, you can buy the white connector very readily.
Thank you very much. This is great help.
Thank you, Adrienne. Right, who wants to go next? Yes, Ken.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, Damon, and thanks very much. Very interesting talk. First time we've met face to face, having spoken a few times on the radio. The first time I spoke to you, Damon, was with the G90, and when I was portable with a 9-to-1 on, and I think 32 foot of wire on the end. All I'm going to say is just how versatile these radios are. I've owned one for about 18 months and I go portable with 20 watts. And it's a fun radio. It's fantastic. And my other aerial for it is a half-wave end-fed. I take my hat off to anybody that has one of these. It's just a superb radio. Back to you, Damon.
Thanks, Ken. And it's nice to see you in the flesh, actually, for the first time. And you're looking far too tanned. You have to get back to the UK, mate. You want to try your length of wire without your 9-to-1 on, Ken. And I bet your ATU will match it, and you won't have to worry about coax. Just plug it into the back of your SO239 and give it a go. But yeah,
well, I concur with what you say, because those ATUs, and one other thing that you probably didn't mention is the internal what is it? Not pan adapter. Band. It covers the band and sweeps the band.
The waterfall.
Pardon?
You mean the waterfall?
No, it's got its own analyzer built in.
Oh yes.
And if you disconnect the ATU side of it by pressing the ATU button, it will sweep the band that you're on. And at the bottom, and I think on one of your slides it did give it, it shows you the frequency where it is at the best resonance. And in your case, it was 1.2-to-1. So if you go straight to that frequency, you've got the best frequency to transmit on in the band. Fantastic.
Yeah, without tuning. Yeah, got you.
Yeah. So that's a fantastic part of the radio as well.
Cool, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Ken. Some good comments there. Who else wants to have a question or comment? Yes, Darren.
Yes, good evening. Excellent presentation, very interesting. The one thought I had was the radio, I can't remember the model number, that did 80, 40, 20 and 15, and you question why somebody would want that portable. Those are my first 4 bands portable. I know some others on here, probably BFJ and Nick's smiling as well, and probably Richard RBG. Those are our first choice bands, so that was quite interesting. My own experience of the Xiegu is when we went up to Black Hill with Nick, and I was very, very impressed with that radio. For the money, they're just phenomenal, and you just wonder where the hobby's going to go and where the big boys are going to go.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad to be outvoted on using 80 portable, because perhaps I should get my act into gear. It's you Northerners, you see, you're tough up there. You carry all that extra weight. But I think
Sorter beams.
Hey?
Sorter beams, lightweight antennas.
Yes. Sorry, I lost my thread then slightly when I said that, didn't I? What were we saying? Yes, so I think yeah, I mean the G1M actually is a remarkable little radio for the money, and the price is just getting cheaper and cheaper. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I don't know. It's just a little anecdote, this, and I don't know if you've been following it and you've picked it up, but many of you will perhaps know, if you're interested in QRP Labs and Hans Summers, who produces the QCX range of transceivers, which you can build as kits. There was I think a Peruvian ham and a German ham who took that SDX, took that QCX and stripped out lots of the components and made a new software-defined radio from it. And they called it the USDX. And basically it does sideband as well as CW, but it does sideband in software, not in the traditional hardware way. And the bottom line is that I think it's DL2MAN is one of the main people who put this thing together. Some Chinese companies have taken what was open source, because his project was open source, and have started producing it. And if you go onto AliExpress or eBay and Google either USDX or USDR, you'll see it. And there's lots of people who started buying it and reviewing it on YouTube. It's about £140 and it does 80 through to 10 meters, and it's the size of that. It's a remarkable little thing. But I noticed that DL2MAN has been putting some YouTube posts up lately about just how much he feels ripped off by some of these particular not Xiegu, but some of these particular Chinese manufacturers, because they've taken what was his open source project and are making, he reckons it would cost $40 to build, and they're selling it for 140. And although his stuff was open source, the license that was issued with open source, you know, they should have been acknowledging what he and the other developers had done and who had been behind it, and they hadn't. And he started to produce a series of videos testing the proper one against the rip-off one. So, you know, not everything Chinese is great. They've taken somebody else's IP and started using it for commercial profit with no acknowledgement, really. But his little radio, the USDX, you can only build it yourself, and nobody offers a kit, sadly. And there's lots of SMD components on it, so I've not braved it yet. But if you Google around it, I mean, that's well, he reckons you can build it for $40, $50, and it will do everything that Xiegu will do. I'm not quite sure to do it quite as well, but it will do it, and you can just hold it in the palm of your hand. Anyway, that was a slight digression, sorry, but it's just a sign of how, you know, the stuff you can get from China and how cheap it can be. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it isn't. You take potluck, don't you?
Yeah, Damon, Darren's given me a cue there to make a couple of comments about my experience of the 5105. I think I got it when it first came out in the UK through Sinatel. So that would have been, I think, 2017. It was a lot cheaper then, actually. I think I only paid about £350 for it, brand new, from Sinatel on special offer when the radio first appeared in the UK. My first one lasted a week and completely folded on me. So I rang Alan at Sinatel. He actually sent me a new one before he'd received my one back. And I thought, do you know, I don't know a single amateur radio supplier in the UK who would send you a radio the day you ring them up, a new one onto you, when you hadn't even posted the original one back to them. I was utterly amazed that anyone was so trusting to do that. And I found two problems with it in its early iteration. You're right, I didn't realise to start with, I'm a CW operator primarily, like you, Damon, and I didn't realise it was cutting off, clipping the first bit of your CW, until various CW operators were then saying they were having difficulty copying the beginning of my transmission. And I found that rather frustrating. It was eventually resolved by a firmware update. But in those days, so I think, Darren, I think it was probably 2018 that we went up Black Hill, which is one of the SOTA summits here on the Southern Pennines. And I think even though I hadn't had the radio that long, I must have had about 10 different firmware updates come out in that time. They were producing so many of them at Xiegu, and I was downloading them all. And you're quite right, they were resolving some of the issues. So the CW bit was resolved, the clipping was resolved, but it created some other problem. And I did find, in the end, I found it very frustrating. And I was waiting for that sweet spot firmware update that was going to come out, and there wasn't going to be any glitches on it, you know, where suddenly the screen would freeze on you. So I'd find myself, you know, I enjoy climbing, and I think I was out in, funny enough, in the German Alps, and I'd climbed a long way to get onto this summit in the winter, and I was happily operating, and suddenly it completely froze on me, and there was nothing I could do with it. You know, I didn't have, I had no way of resetting it if you like, in the field that was able to resolve it. Although you can reset it, it didn't solve the problem. It just was completely frozen. And it wasn't until I got it home and stuck it on the 13.8 volt power rather than the internal battery and spent some time playing with it that I got the thing resolved. I think I had to put a new firmware update. And I found that really frustrating. But all the positives you talk about, I think you're right. It's about the same size as the Elecraft radios, the small KS2 and the K3 radio. Very, very similar size. It's a fantastic little box. I mean, it's really, you know, it feels very solid. Nothing looks like it's going to fall off it. I think it knocks the spots off the 817. I had an 817 ND. It knocks spots off it in terms of its usability, the size and visibility of the screen. The fact that on the 817 ND, you've got to delve through about 9,700 different variations of menus to change something you want to change on it. And I find that really, really annoying and really frustrating. So although the 817 has got 2 meters and 70 sems on it, that the Xiegu doesn't have, it doesn't have the built-in ATU. The battery on the 817, unless you've forked out a lot of money on one of the expensive additional batteries on the 817, is not as good as the 5105 battery. So I think it's definitely a better radio than that. But I just got fed up. I tell you that the 2 issues I had with the 5105 that they never seem to resolve. You're right about, first of all, about the internal speaker on it. It really is lousy. It's kind of just about okay. You can get by for a little bit of time on it, but you wouldn't want to use it too long. The sound quality is not very good. I had a problem with the headphones. When you plug the headphones in and you had to select a different option on the menu to switch between the speaker and the headphones, I never found the headphone quality very good. It would drop down, the signal would drop down as soon as I put the headphones on. And one of the firmware updates resolved it, and then a subsequent one took it back to where it was before. And I found that rather frustrating. So in the end, I found myself, sadly, with the 5105, although it's a lovely radio and I still own it, I ended up not using the 817. I ended up using another QRP rig when I went QRP. And then I made the terrible mistake of, well, actually it wasn't a mistake, of selling the 817, and I had an IC706 as well. I sold the 2 and convinced myself that I could therefore only spend £550 on the 705, the ICOM 705, and bought the 705, which I think is a fabulous radio. It doesn't have the internal ATU. It is hellishly expensive at £1,200 if you're not doing what I did, which is trading in 2 other radios to get the 705. I haven't come across any glitches, any issues. There has been a recent firmware update on the ICOM, but only one, and it's made some improvements to it. But it's got so many more features, particularly its ability on 2 meters and 70 sems, and of course digital FM as well, which I've used a few times on 2 and 70 is very good on the 705. But I mean, I'm slightly biased because I own the 7300 as well, and the 705 is like a miniature version of the 7300. So I have taken the 705 away with me camping, and that's become my radio of choice now. And I was having this conversation with another radio ham just a few weeks ago on air about the radios. And I told him I had the 515, and he kept trying to persuade me to sell it to him. And I said, look, I don't want to sell it to you because it annoys me, some of the glitches on it. And he said, I don't care. He says, I'll buy it from you. I'll pay you, you know, however much he was prepared to pay. And in the end, I said, look, I don't want to sell it. And I told him it was because that I didn't think it was fair to him as a new amateur to buy off me a radio that did have glitches on it that he might find frustrating. I don't think that was a genuine answer from me. I think I was actually not selling it to him because I didn't want to sell it. And I don't want to part with it because I do like it. So it's sitting here in the shack. It hasn't been used for some time, but it almost certainly will be. And it will be, because although I tend to use resonance antennas when I go out operating QRP, I think the fact it's got the internal ATU and the ATU works as well as you described. Darren will recall this. When we went up Black Hill, one of our other members took his 817 with him, spent the afternoon using the 817. I don't think, and that was David, I don't think he made a single contact. While
Correct.
he was struggling to make a single contact, I think I'd made 6 or 7 contacts using the 5105. So in operation, side by side, I know we were operating on different bands, but nevertheless, the band he was trying to operate on was open, as were the others, and he was struggling to get himself heard on 5 watts. I wasn't struggling, and getting very good audio reports on sideband, and also I was using CW. So I mean, it was, it's got, I think, and Ken's persuaded me that the G90 is a very good radio. I haven't heard any bad words about the G90. So that's my spin on it, Damon, to add to your comments, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the things that I'd just encourage you to do is just check that you've got the latest firmware on it, Nick, version 3, which is on the Sinotel site, because that, for me, that seems to have fixed everything, and I've had no glitches since. I think the 705, I really love one, but I'm just not sure I can justify it for a radio that I use occasionally, and that I'd be worried if I dropped it. I don't know. Going back to Adrienne's point, the website of that company in Europe, it's not in Germany, it's in Sweden. It's Xiegu.eu. Xiegu.eu. If because of the dreaded Brexit, that makes it easier for you to get things from Sweden than Britain, then that might be helpful. I think there's one other point you'd mentioned, Nick, I was going to come back to. Oh, just on the G90. Yeah, I think people do generally seem to have had a better experience, I think, with the release of the G90 than the 5105. But again, not without issues. There have been issues with the G90. So, for example, when they did a firmware update, they discovered that when the ATU tuned, it tuned not necessarily the full 20 watts, but close to it, which meant that, technically speaking, foundation license holders would be breaching the license just tuning their antenna. So they did a firmware update to reduce the tuning power, and then when they let it back out, the tuner didn't work properly. But they fixed it, and I think the difference between Xiegu and the likes of ICOM and your firmware update that you described on the 705 is basically the powerhouse that is ICOM, Yaesu, Kenwood, that have got lots of developers working for them, certainly more than one, and Xiegu, who have the one, and so speed is an issue. One other thing, though, just on firmware, actually, is what I think about it is the firmware updating process is antiquated on the Xiegu. You have to use some software called TerraTerm. It's a bit MS-DOS-like. You've got to follow the instructions absolutely to the letter, or you'll screw it up. Not that you'll ever break it. You can always get it back. Nobody, I think, yet has successfully bricked the radio beyond the point of repair with a firmware update. At least I'm told. But it's not straightforward. When I had the Lab 599 on test, they just released a firmware update for that. So I thought, I'll try it, and it was quite a bit easier than the Xiegu firmware updating process. Again, though, you had to follow the instructions absolutely to the letter of the instruction, because if you just got one thing slightly out of sequence and the turning on, off, or whatever it was, it wouldn't accept it. But I think they do need to update their ability to update firmware in a more user-friendly way, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Right, who wants to ask a question or make a point? Yes, Terry, VFC.
Yes, how do you do, Damon? Thank you very much. When you go out portable with a friend who's also got a radio, can you use? Do you get any interaction between transmitting on the Xiegu and the other one suffering noise?
That's easy, Terry. I don't have any friends.
Problem solved. Gone away.
Part of the problem for me down here is that because I'm rural, there aren't many people my sort of inclination who want to go out and do portable work. Most of the people at my local club at Taunton aren't particularly active, and so I get a bit frustrated. I tend to go off and doing it on my own mostly. Although my friend up the road who's got the other 5105, we did operate portable a couple of times together from the same hilltop in Bude in Cornwall. And yeah, there was a little bit of bleed through, but we were only sat, well, if we'd have both put our arms out, we could have probably touched each other. We were both running end-fed half waves into a tree just 10 feet high, but in slightly opposite directions. And yeah, on some bands, there was a bit of breakthrough, but nothing you couldn't deal with. And I guess if we'd have been a bit more sensible and operated a little bit further apart, like opposite sides of a field, then maybe we'd have resolved that.
Okay, so breakthrough, was that sort of signals which sounded like signals, or was it noise which...
no, I could hear his CQ.
Okay.
But superimposed over the band that I was operating on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which was it was difficult to operate like that, to be honest. But then I did find, it's a while ago now, so my memory's a little hazy. But I did find if we by choosing different bands, it may be that when I chose bands that weren't harmonically related, perhaps I know. Mind you, they're all pretty much harmonically related, aren't they? But yeah, so I did notice that when we changed on some bands it happened and some bands it didn't. I can't quite recall now, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks, Damon, very much.
I've had a similar experience though with 7300 and 590 in contest conditions. Again, operating in similar situations, and you get breakthrough. The 7300 was hopeless. The 590 was a lot better, but again, there's a lot of difference in price there as well.
Yeah.
I don't think that's so much the price of the radio. I just think it's good work, good operating procedure to stay quite well away from each other. When we went up to the field up there a few months ago, I noticed straight away, it's almost like we had to shout to each other, what band are you on? Because I'll go on this band instead. Hopefully not harmonically related.
No, I was running a contest where the two radios were in a tent together and the aerials were reasonably distant. The 7300 was getting a lot of feedback, whereas the, interference, whereas the 590 was a lot better at rejecting the RF from the 7300.
Yeah, I've had it happen here at home as well. The club ran a Cricket World Cup special event station from my house, and I used my rig in the shack, and they were in the conservatory next door behind me here. But the antennas were separated by 40-50 meters, but we still suffered from it. Yeah,
you're going to get it out of you. But at the end of the day, the Cricket World Cup was an excellent event, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took part in that as well. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, anyone else with a question or comment to Daimon that I haven't seen waving at me? So we'll scroll through the two lots of screens.
Just make another comment, Nick.
Yes, go on, Ken, yeah.
What I think is important with the Xiegu radio or any low power radio, and I do the opposite insofar as I work a lot of DX, we all know that, on relatively high power, sometimes on 100 watts, relatively low. But you've got to respect the fact that when you're using 5 watts or 20 watts into a piece of wire or whatever you're using portable, you're not going to be able to work the world, and it's more fun. And it's getting that message over that it's a fun radio rather than a serious operator's trying to work the other side of the world. And that's the key to the Xiegu, I think. And I think they've got a niche with this market now of low power. And they've bought into this market, and they are taking Yaesu, Kenwood and Icon by storm. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, Ken, I'll just make a comment about the about power. My experience, and Damon, tell me if you agree with me. My experience is that 5 watts on CW, or even lower than that, where conditions are fine, you can make good contacts. You know, certainly across Europe, and sometimes to elsewhere in the world on the higher HF bands. On sideband, it's more difficult. And I actually find the difference between, for example, being able to use 10 watts on the 705 rather than 5 does make a difference on sideband. And I've got no doubts that being able to use 20 watts of sideband on the G1M just gives you that slightly better ability to make those sideband contacts on HF.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at that long conversation with Tony in Italy with the 3 rigs on test, you know, switching between the 5 watts of the G1M and the 5105 and the 20 watts of the Xiegu, I was running through my beam. I've got a 5-element spider beam here, a 5-band spider beam, and we're on, I think we're on 10 meters. So I'd got 4 elements on 10 meters. And when I switched from the 20 watts on the G90 to the 5 watts of the 5105, as you would expect, there was a sort of like I went from something like 5 and 9 plus 40 to 5 and 9 plus 30 or something, you know. So when you're at that power level, it makes not a jot of difference, does it? But when you're down, when the conditions aren't that good, or you're using a portable antenna or a compromised antenna, and you're struggling to make a contact, you know, you're at the sort of the 3 and 3 end of the RST scale. Well, yeah, your 20 watts makes all the world of difference. Then it's the difference between it doesn't make a bigger difference in terms of S points. It's the difference between being heard and not. It's the difference between having a QSO and not. And I think that 20 watts makes a difference. One thing that I thought was interesting, I had a couple of conversations with an amateur, I can't remember his call sign, in Scotland now, who's big into the old Klansman type radios, and he's got a few PRC 320s, you know, the old man pack radio. And we had a number of conversations. He was out walking one day with his and one of these man pack antennas. And I think he was ex-military. He might have been ex-Signals or ex-REMI, I'm not sure. And he was saying, you know, many of these military man-pack radios were built at 20 watts for a reason. There's like a sweet spot for SSB between consuming too much power that you have to carry too big a battery and not having enough power that you can't make the QSO. And I think there's probably some truth in that.
Jeff, were you trying to come in?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Daimon. Very interesting talk. I have a dream, or I have some dreams, or everyone have dreams. I really like these small radios. And I think a couple of months ago in Practical Wireless, they talked about these boutique firms. There are more than Xiegu and those in Russia and China and some other countries who are really challenging the big three. And I think one of the dreams that I have is these little small radios, if they could incorporate, for example, a Raspberry Pi, so that you can run all kinds of digital modes, especially for emergency communication, for example, things like WinLink, ES8 call, and other things. And the other dream that I have is that the power to run these little rigs will be even more flexible, so that you can use solar panels, batteries, the batteries could charge, the solar panels could charge the batteries and things like that. So I think these are two dreams that I have, and I hope the Chinese and the Russians, or maybe ICOM and Xiegu would do that. But
yeah, well, thank you, Jeff. I mean, interestingly, you've just made me think, this is one of my favorite little radios.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The QCX Mini from Hans Summers in Turkey. Yeah. That's a 20 meter radio, and actually it works on 30 meters too, CW only. But you know, you talk about power. Well, that's the battery pack I made for it, in a mint tin, 3 series 18650s. That runs that on Whisper for more than 12 hours.
Great.
You know, it's phenomenal, isn't it? Absolutely phenomenal. And Hans has just brought out, in terms of your digital modes that you talked about, Hans has just released something called the QDX. Yeah. It went on sale, he put 500 on sale the other night, and they were sold in 15 minutes. And the QDX is about the size of the QCX, and it runs, it's digital modes only.
Yeah.
It's just a black box that connects to your Raspberry Pi or your computer or whatever you describe. I'm not quite sure what the price point is. It might be about the same as that. It's about $50.
$60, Daimon.
Right, thank you. Yeah.
$60 US.
So I think, you know, it's little I suppose the message is it's little companies like Hans Summers, like Xiegu, like others who are doing the innovation. I had this arrive yesterday. I don't know if you've seen one of these. It's a slight digression. This is Swedish.
Okay.
That's something called a Zactec whisper transmitter. Hans does a whisper, a U3S sort of whisper kit. This does 80 through to 10 meters. You plug it into a computer, program in it. It's got a GPS antenna in it, 200 milliwatts, and it will band switch for you. And you can run it off 5-volt battery pack.
Yeah,
So, you know, that's a Swedish amateur. And it's these little enterprises that I think are actually making the big three look big and cumbersome and stumbling around in the dark. And I think they've lost the way.
And even have the possibility to connect to your phone so that you can, you know, use your phone in combination with your transceiver and so on. I think the Swedish company you are talked about, I think it could be DX Pile or DX Pileup, who is the dealer of Xiegu and the DX Lab and other things. I think it's DX Pile or DX Pileup, something like that in Sweden.
Yes, that's the Xiegu Swedish dealer, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is
I think in
cheaper for
terms
us
of
in
digital
Europe.
modes.
Yeah.
I think in terms of digital modes, Jeff, Nick, does the 705 has a built-in sound card? I think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does,
But again, it doesn't. And what surprises me is that lots of rigs now have the ability for built-in RTTY and built-in PSK31, the Xiegu included. I don't understand why, because it's open source software. I don't understand why there isn't a rig that has built-in FT8 or built-in FT4.
Yeah. You can do it with the Raspberry
there's a
Pi.
trick being missed somewhere.
Just put a Raspberry Pi into the transceiver and you can put whatever program on it.
But if it, like you say, if that was integrated in some way, think becomes
about
less
weight.
messy, doesn't it? It's a neater package.
And you don't need the cables to connect computers and things like that. Just one box and everything with it, and connect with your phone, and you are off. And especially in an emergency situation, that would be brilliant. I'm talking about the flooding we have here in Belgium and in Germany and so on. These are the kind of things they experience, that, okay, you have to connect everything together, and you can have all kind of trouble with that. Thank you very much, Daimon.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Right, anyone else got a question or comments? Let me just have a look around everyone in the room. Wave at me, shout if you don't catch my eye, then yes, Ray again.
I'll just make a quick comment. I'm pleased that I was really listening last time that you said Hans Summers, because I thought you were saying Anne Summers, and she deals with completely different products. You said you said it, well, you said it several times, and I thought, is he talking about what I'm thinking about? Anyway, sorry, that's just an observation.
It's amazing how radios come packaged these days.
Yeah. I'm a recent returnee to amateur radio. I got my license in 1980, and I then discovered another hobby, which is bowls, and it's taken me completely away from radio, and I came back into it because of the COVID situation, because I couldn't play bowls mixing with people. But, and I'm pleased. I was just amazed how everything's gone digital. You know, I don't really need a radio. All I need is my computer, one or two bits of software, and I'm up and running. You know.
Yeah, one of the nicest things I heard the other day was there's you know, the HubNet. There's a HubNet repeater in Barry, South Wales, across the Bristol Channel from me, GB7ISW, and I was listening to a fellow there. And he was a 90-year-old boy diagnosed with cancer, lying in bed, having a natter using HubNet from his mobile phone that some local amateur had gone and bought him and uploaded the app. So I thought that was fantastic. You know, people who just wouldn't have been able to access radio because he was in a care home, you know, no antennas allowed and all the rest of it. People who just couldn't access radio were able to enjoy it again. Really, really good.
Well, I remember when I used to have a TS140S and a cobweb antenna, because antennas around here are really a no-go, but I have one anyway. And I thought, well, you know, the neighbours would have to whistle. But I did work a VK on one rare occasion, and I really struggled to get the contact, which I was so pleased with. When I come onto this, VKs are nothing. I can work the world. I can work the world on my iPhone now.
Yeah. It's got its place, definitely.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So,
Thank you, Ray.
and when people say that it's not real radio, to me, real radio is communicating with other people via a system. So, you know, that's my view on it.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Anyone else with a final question to Daimon? If not, can we show our appreciation to Daimon in the usual way for tonight's contribution? Thanks, Daimon. Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the invitation, and obviously I've enjoyed talking to you and sharing my findings and hearing your experiences too. But you've also done me a massive favour. You've also proven to me that my internet problems lie with my children, not with my phone line.
Right. Well, look, thank you very much, Daimon. That was a fantastic contribution. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for sparing the time to come and talk to us. And there were one or two issues on your internet connection. You weren't aware of them when you were speaking. The bandwidth went down, and you sounded like a Dalek for about 15 seconds, but you very quickly came back to normal radio quality. So no problem at all. So thank you very much, Daimon. I'm just going to end the record button, and I'll go through some other bits of news.
Thank you. I'll leave you if you don't mind, because I'm going to put my youngest to bed. But thanks very much for the
Okay, cheers, Daimon.
73.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank